Us at the tavern, have a drink or two. I'm the eclectic goat, and I'm here to play with you. We'll discuss the theory and the mechanics, how we ask for crits, Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards.
And good evening to everyone. I'd like to welcome chat, welcome my panel, and I am delighted to say that I have had 5 hours of sleep and I no longer sound like I've been smoking a pack of non-filters a day. Um, I've had lots of people asking about my health, so things are much better. I have a fabulous panel tonight. Um, I've been looking forward to tonight's show for most of the week. As usual, we're going to go around, do some introductions, and then we will talk to the chat a little bit. Dave, if you'd like to start.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm Dave Haddon. I'm a Warden of Worlds and the creator of the Kingdom of Keshinar. We are an ancient Egypt-themed TTRPG setting for 5e, and something I've been homebrewing for a couple of decades now, and finally decided to publish it. And we've been pretty serious about publishing it for the past couple of years. And our Kickstarter is coming out next month. So, no, I mean next week. God, I wish it was next month.
Always good to feel prepared.
Yeah.
I understand that completely.
I need paper. I'm breathing into a paper bag every 5 minutes. It's really helping.
All right, Neil.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Neil Litherland. Some of you might know me as the Literary Mercenary if you hang around Facebook gaming groups, Reddit, etc., etc. I'm a freelance RPG writer. I've done a little bit of everything at this point. My own game, Army Men, whose art is in my background, came out about a year ago, and I've just been cranking stuff out ever since. Especially if you're a fan of the company Azukale Games, you might have seen my face over on their YouTube channel. And so just audio dramas, tabletop RPGs, and pretty much anything I can get my hands on as far as creative endeavors that involve dice and or statistics.
Awesome. And friend of the channel, Comics Dad. Welcome.
Hey everybody, Comics Dad here. It's like I'm in one of my videos. But for anybody who doesn't know, I'm Comics Dad. I have a YouTube channel as well. I talk mostly comic books and play some video games, do some live streaming with games. And I have a bi-weekly show where I have creators on, whether it's comic book, YouTube, content, whatever. And I just talk to them about all sorts of things, but most importantly, comics. And just a heads up to everybody, if you hear any banging over my microphone, a storm is coming through here. So it's either them, the storm, or my children. Like that.
I mean, really, 6 half dozen.
Yeah.
Storms, children. Okay, so we're going to go through and say hello to the chat. I do, however, want to start off with something a little bit different today. As most of you are familiar with another friend of the channel, Jacob Ironsides, he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. For those of you who haven't heard, he's ended up in a bit of an issue where he and his parents have to move quite suddenly. His parents are both very elderly, have some health issues, and I guess he has now made this kind of public knowledge through the GoFundMe. Jacob himself is actually in a wheelchair. And so having to move in a very short period of time is extremely hard. They have to hire movers because none of them can do it. And so he has a GoFundMe up to try and help his parents with some of those expenses. Eraserhead is going to put that in the chat over the course of the show today. I'm not monetized. I have never asked for donations. I will never ask for donations. I will never take sponsors. However, for tonight, I would really appreciate it if everyone would pretend that I'm monetized, and instead of sending me super chats, please send a little something Jacob's way just to try and give him a hand. And Eraserhead, whenever you can get that link up, I will get that pinned. And so, into the chat. We have a brand new polar bear joining our chat for today. I'm just going to call you Burr because I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce that as a run-on. We met yesterday in Dead Man Walking's celebration, and he seems like a lovely bear. Rick is with us. Rio is with us. For once, Rio was not the first person in the chat. I am astonished. We have the Marx Brothers from the lurking section. I think you are new to the chat, so welcome. Eraserhead is as always, our fabulous mod. He is the Lord of the Links. Tomby is with us. Tomby, thank you very much for the raid from your group. Without Tomby, this live stream would not exist at all. He not only convinced me to do it, but he is responsible for many of the setups and the music and the everything. So Tomby is the man. As your GM is here, welcome. Huh. I had not noticed that that comment earlier, but I'm curious to talk to you about it later. Let's see, who else do we have? Mr. Groshmal is here, and the aforementioned Dadman Walking. The need for naps is getting contagious. I don't need a nap. I had 5 hours of sleep. I feel great. I'm sure we're going to get more people in as we go. But welcome to everyone who is already here. And we're going to start off talking about Egypt. Dave, if you would like to talk to us a little bit about your game, how it came to be, kind of a brief overview of the system, basically anything you think we need to know that you can cram into about 20 or 25 minutes.
Okay, well, that's lots of time. So we're all fascinated by Egypt because of movies like The Mummy, and it's just such an iconic and mysterious setting, and the fact that it doesn't really exist anymore, but they've left us this giant legacy. Actually, my fascination with it really got cemented with the first one of the very first published modules that TSR came out with, called the Desert of Desolation series by Tracy and Laura Hickman in like 1982 or something, and it was the first module that I ran as a DM, and I think it was really very aesthetically ancient Egypt, and it kind of incorporated those themes beautifully into three very concise modules, and had great ideas. It was a fantastic series. It still is. It's aged very well, and but that combined my two big passions, right? Dungeons and Dragons and ancient Egypt. So I started homebrewing my own ancient Egypt themed campaign from then, and took big breaks along the way. But about call it 15 years ago, I went back to Egypt and decided, okay, I really need to do something with this. And I had run the campaign setting through a couple of different systems, actually, for RuneQuest and through various D&D rule systems. And decided, this is cool. The players really like it. I should consider publishing it. And then after I kind of exited my last company in this about like 6 or 8 months ago, leading up to that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to do this, and started writing it. I figured, how hard could it be? I've run it like 4 times over the 2-year campaign, 1 through 20 each time. So I've got all these notes. It should be easy. Yeah, right. It's incredibly difficult. I've written some novels too, and I've published papers, and none of it compares to the level of effort required to build a D&D setting, because you're building an entire world, and you can't, the way you have to like deal with the expository text is you can't just unroll it as you like, because you're only getting one story, right? You just turn the page in a novel, and that's what and you can kick things down the road, but you can't do that in a setting, because you never know what the players are going to do. So the players are going to derail things constantly, and that's the fun of it. And you got to be prepared for that. And you got to prepare the GM and give them the tools they need to be able to deal with that. So our setting is inspired by ancient Egypt. We take pride in a very high degree of authenticity in terms of the culture, the technology, the architecture, the magic, which they practice magic for real. And of course, they're very complex, very colorful theology and pantheon. And we try to adhere to that as closely as possible without sacrificing gameplay. And it's actually, we have an Egyptologist on staff that reviews everything that we do, and then also acts as an oracle for like all of the game design team. Go to her constantly and like, Dr. Waller, what did ancient Egypt have to say about this? And the whole thing has been really fascinating because the deeper we dig in, the more we adhere to the canon of Egyptology that we have and understand based on all the writings they've passed down and we've been able to interpret, and the artifacts that we've dug up, which is probably 5% of what exists in terms of buildings and artifacts. The more enriching it's been for the game. So it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. And now that we've been at it with a really large team, we just got back from Egypt, actually. It took part of the game design team over there in December to do field research. It was a bit of a boondoggle. It's like, let's go to Egypt. We're doing this massive Egypt theme campaign setting. So why not? And that turned out to be an excellent decision also, because until you're there in these monuments and kind of face to face with them. Like, I was at the Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple, and there was these gargoyles. And so I was talking to the guide about them. And it turns out, ancient Egyptians really invented the concept of the gargoyle. And the more I studied, the more I learned that so much of our society, of the very tenets and kind of foundation of our society and our culture, actually go back. We think a lot of it traces back to Greece and Rome, and it does, but that's only because Greece and Rome got it from ancient Egypt. Like our 365-day calendar, Egyptian, and so many things. They invented police forces, and to this day we still embalm people and bury them in boxes, and and sometimes in above ground tombs. And so it just goes on and on. They invented medicine. They had pregnancy tests. They had very powerful sense of equality of men and women. Women were able to hold power over men, and actually property passed through the matriarchal line instead of the male line. It's like, it's just a really fascinating culture that lasted for 3,500 years. Our culture is 200 years old. And in modern society, governments don't last more than 200 years before they're kind of like collapse into chaos and anarchy. And we're beating the odds, so knock on the wood here in America. But imagine, and they had dynasties, that came and gone, but some of them lasted for, hundreds of years. And they kept a contiguous cultural reference state, through that entire time. And it evolved too. But so it's been an incredibly rich source of gaming material for us to build this really comprehensive campaign setting, that goes beyond the aesthetics of just sand, pharaohs, and mummies and pyramids, and into the real details. It's not an historical role play because, we don't, I enjoy those kind of reenactment style things where you're in an actual specific period, but for what we're trying to achieve, it would be complex, and I think it wouldn't have as broad of an appeal. So really, it is just like, it has like I said, it's as if ancient Egypt persisted in alternate reality for 3,000 years, but where the magic, the monsters, and the gods were real. And by real, I mean real in the sense of TTRPG, where the gods are meddlesome and they show up and they have plans, and magic is practically an everyday thing that people can use, and monsters are, they're not just stories you scare your kids to sleep with. They are, they're out there, they're hiding under the garbage can, right? And it's been really just very rewarding, very enriching, fascinating. We've been touring around the country, running historical pre-shots on our lore. So we don't want to give anything away because, the Kickstarter comes out next week, April 8th. But we've been, for 2 years now, we've been running cons. So we created one-shots that happen in the past of our lore. So it doesn't give anything away for the campaign. And we this year we're doing one a month. We just completed a 2,400 mile road trip. We started at Scarab in South Carolina, went up to Gary Con, came back. Now we're going to Raven Con. After that, we have an actual Egyptology conference, which is nutty, and this is nice because it's showing how TTRPG is kind of entering the mainstream consciousness more. It's not, it's emerging from our basements, right, and our sand tables in our basements, and into kind of more, the common consciousness, like not just because of the movie, which was great, finally made a good movie, but because of all the benefits that it suddenly realized to have. It's the opposite of the satanic panic, right? I mean, there's a lot of clinical evidence out there, proper published clinical research that shows the benefits, the mental health benefits of role-playing games, and and also the power of experiential learning. So that's my background, actually, professionally, outside of currently doing this D&D thing, but with Orthane Productions. But prior to that, I had companies that did simulation training for physicians and healthcare workers, and our whole shtick was that rather than reading or just sitting in a room and listening to a lecture, what we did is we created a simulation so you could have an immersive experience, and that it just shows that you learn much better. That's why we train our pilots that way. Well, Dungeons and Dragons is the same thing. So with our game, you're learning a lot about ancient Egyptian history and culture and lore without even trying to, because you're experiencing it through your players' lives. So we're about halfway through the development of the content, maybe 65%. And the Kickstarter will that will run for a month, and then we're have a very aggressive schedule to try and get it out. We're incentivized to do that, because when we go to Gen Con and Origins and MomoCon and all the rest of our busy con schedule for the rest of the year, as quickly as possible, we want to get actual product on the shelves, and so that we've got something to hand people. We just came back from Gary Con. That was fantastic, and we sponsored Gary, events at Gary Con, and also ran games continuously the entire time. So it's starting to get out there. People are starting to engage with it, and I think we're drawing the Egyptophiles out of the woodwork, which is nice. A lot of people that are actual Egyptologists or have studied Egyptology, historians, archaeologists, or just fascinated or just plain fascinated with ancient Egypt, especially now with all the new data coming out about like that muon study, where they use these muon detectors to show there's a giant cavity inside the Great Pyramid that we haven't, no one's tapped, right? So there's so much more mysteries that ancient Egypt has yet to reveal for us, that are just there, lying in the sand, awaiting, or buried in these sealed off, chambers that are waiting to show us their secrets. It's the gift that keeps on giving, And one of the things that really struck me as I was digging deeper and deeper and deeper into all of this is how vast, just absolutely vast, this culture was. Like they would know their burial rites were. They would mummify the dead, and that went through all kinds of different stages and process over the course of time. And then also they take their stuff with them, right? Your cats, your pets, your vials, jugs of beer, furniture, little shabti, like figurines, which would animate in the afterlife and be your servants. And so I asked this as a trivia question a lot of times when we're giving out prizes at cons, like how many embalmed animals did the ancient Egyptians bury with them? And it's I can give you a clue. It's an astonishingly big number. Anyone care to hazard a guess? It's like Price is Right.
I mean, I know that they had horses and goats and all sorts of stuff that they were taking with them in the afterlife. And I think I read somewhere once that they would take goats after death because they believed they needed to sacrifice them to the gods on the other side.
And then, but also their pets, like cats, which is
so my question is: it the number of individual animals or the number of variety? Okay, number of individuals.
Actual number of embalmed individual animals that are under the either have been dug up or are estimated to be in total under the sand still, that were interned with the dead in ancient Egypt.
I was going to guess somewhere around 10,000.
I was going to say 12.
Godi, do you have a guess?
I don't know, because I thought I had a guess until you got to the part about trying to guess what was still under there.
We'll give a free copy of the game to anybody, the person who gets it closest.
Price is Right rules are allowed.
Price is Right rules are allowed until we close the bidding.
If you're talking still under there, especially since they're
No,
discovering.
been removed, so we now have them, and then
Mhm.
also plus the estimation, the total number that's estimated, the pretty close number.
Right, that's what I was talking. It's the estimation that I was struggling with. I think it's gotta be higher than that. I think it's gotta be, I don't know. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say 25 or 30,000.
Yeah, it's 70 million.
Oh, goodness. We were all way off.
Yes, no,
I
MGR,
I almost I almost went to 100,000 and then I was like, "Nah, that's probably gonna be a little
we
crazy."
have 20 million of them have been dug up. Like remember in the Victorian times, they would like mummies. The Victorians used to grind mummies up and use them and like drink them and things like that. There's just so
It's
much of it.
the origin of the drug mumia, ladies and gentlemen, for anyone who's at a party fall afoul of that.
Sound like a good Cthulhu, a Cthulhu potion. Yeah, but it's incredible, and it just goes to show how long that culture lasted, right? I mean, 3,500 years is a really long time. It's most of human recorded history that they persisted, right? And that's why all the tombs are empty. Is because everything was stolen already. Not only that, but then they would take the tombs and they'd reuse them. So they're like, here's an empty tomb. Well, let's just use it and bury our king or nobleman or whatever in there.
I'm
But
tired. I don't wanna build another gigantic stone statue.
that's another thing that's fascinating. It interests me in particular because before I got into like the whole simulation training thing, I had a construction company actually, and I did restoration of historic buildings in different places, temples in different parts of the world. I get to some in India and some in Africa and here in the U.S. And so I know quite a bit about just masonry construction, especially ancient masonry construction. And the thing is earthquakes will usually take down most buildings because the earthquakes happen all on the surface, which is why everybody thinks you should be on the surface during an earthquake. No, you want to be underground, like in the subway. That's the best place to be in an earthquake because all the actual seismic movement happens mostly at the surface, and it's a sideways thing like this. And so because we build our masonry units, like if you think about a brick wall, how it's just like row of bricks, then you offset it into another row and then put some mortar and offset it into another row, those just shake apart and fall down. And so the ones that have just keep it surviving are the ones that have what's called irregular keys. And actually, this is one of our products that we're making at our Kickstarter. We're going to sell it afterwards. And so this is actually practically a tracing for all intents and purposes. A person would be like this big. I don't have a mini here, but a person would be like this big on the wall. So this would be like a 10-foot tall section of wall, right? And this is actually derived. I derived this from research I did on the masonry in the Valley Temple, which is right in the shadow of the Great Pyramid of Giza on the Giza Plateau. And you notice how all the stones are weird shapes. Now, not all of them are like that, but key ones are. And it's called irregular keys. And it's like, now I can tell you, building a wall like this compared to building a regular brick wall is 10 times more difficult. Making all those stones fit together that way, it's crazy. And but the net effect of this, whether it was intentional or not, is that when you have an earthquake, it doesn't shake apart because the walls are just locked together, right? And that's so then it just winds up staying together. So I had to change it a little bit when I did the design for these tiles so that they match up. But they even have like you go to a corner and there'll be a block that goes around the corner. So that entire corner piece had to be removed. And they did all this with copper tools. And actually, the way they remove the material is with copper tools, which is interesting because copper is softer than granite. So it's a little tricky, but they did it. And also with dolomite pounding stones. So if they wanted to remove material, they would just take this rock that's harder on the Mohs scale than granite and just bash away at it. And a lot of people, there's a lot of kind of conspiracy flying around that's not that. No, they had some kind of lost technology, right? They can't have done it that way. But then there's these scientists in Russia called Scientists Against Myths that actually uncategorically prove that is exactly how they do it. They did it. So even the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, so it would have been the biggest obelisk in the world, is huge. It's like the size of a small submarine or like a tractor trailer, or maybe a little bigger. It's broke while they were carving it out. So then they abandoned the project, but it was great because it showed us a lot of things. We found all these stones, dolomite pounding stones all over the place there. And it's sort of scoopy, the way all the material's being removed. and I see like the alien kind of theorists are like, well, that's because they had some kind of like backhoe, like an arm that was scraping it out. I'm like, no, that's because they had an arm, a human arm, and so when they're banging, it naturally does it in that arc. And it's incredible how much you can do. So it turns out 130 people in 3 years could have carved that out. So they've just really patient. And the Fertile Crescent, the Fertile Delta, the Nile Delta provided a lot of food, and so they're able to grow and support a big workforce. Um, and so it was a really, really incredibly rich society. I mean, it's the pharaohs of old were wealthy beyond human imagining. Like trillionaires, basically. So all these are all the things that we like. We geek out on this stuff, right? Like I even got somebody on my team who's actually our art director, master's in fine art, but her specialty, and also she's kind of a medievalist. She tilts it like, at Ren competitions and uh, jousts and fighting and what have you. She's really fascinating character. Her name is Lady X, and she does some podcasts for us. You can hear her on Keshnar Confidential on our YouTube channel if you're interested. She does really good interviews, but she is an expert in ancient textiles. So a big consideration to how we built well, first of all, there's no like bikini armor, and the people are dressed the way they were dressed. Actually in the period, all the way from the soldiers to the nobles, what have you. We extrapolate to a certain extent too, because we're like, okay, with all this, with magic and all these other things, kind of how would it have extrapolated? Because again, it's not just a pure historical reenactment type of setting; it's a fun setting. But that informed the way we had to develop the economy. So she's like, well, where did the flax come from? Where did this kind of material come from? Where did that kind of material come from? And so then we would describe the kingdom and the way it expanded. Then it's based on that concept. So I guess I got 3 minutes. So I'll tell you a little.
Lots of linen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and silk. But it had to come from somewhere else. And for instance, ancient Egypt didn't have wood. There's palm trees are garbage, for building anything. So they had to get their wood from Lebanon. So they had to import it all. And so that's the same case in Keshnar. So just a couple of minutes about the lore because it's interesting. So because the gods are real and the gods are meddlesome, the gods have an agenda, and they have formed this relationship with the mortals, who are the Keshites, where up to this point they didn't have divine magic, and so they said, we will provide you with divine magic if you enter into this covenant with us to kind of regain your allegiance. So if you'll worship us and not Apep, the great worm of destruction, then we will give you divine magic. And then the first pharaoh, Ra-Memnon, negotiated also that then all the pharaohs could like take them. They could live in immortality in a room with the gods, with all of their possessions. And then Ra put this caveat on there saying, well, okay, but but it can't be hereditary, because it's only a matter of time before a pharaoh has a child that's a couple of sandwiches short of a picnic, and the empire starts a slow death spiral, right? So it's got to be really the most worthy of you, the wisest, the most intelligent, the bravest of you. And we can't, the gods couldn't even make that choice, because the gods will never agree on anything, and so then that's what their phoenix comes in. So the phoenix is this instantiation of all the common will of the gods. So when the pharaoh dies, the phoenix appears and chooses the next pharaoh, and you never know who it's going to be. Like 500 years ago in Keshnar, there was slavery, just like there was in ancient Egypt, right? And but then the phoenix came and chose a slave to be pharaoh. So the first thing that pharaoh did when he went on the throne is abolish slavery, and so it's a meritocracy, essentially. It's a theocracy meets meritocracy, which is very similar to how ancient Egypt was in terms of its government and its culture.
I think we had a couple of questions. Somebody had asked about whether or not it was going to be compatible with 2024 or the original 5e, and I think that got answered in the chat. Do you have to be playing 5e, or will all of the rules be self-contained in the book when it's put out?
So this product that we're putting out is 5e, and we were shooting for 5e 2024. The SRD isn't out yet, so we're a little nervous about that, but we have a little bit of time to kind of backpedal and figure out exactly what we need to do to dial it into the new SRD. But it is 2024 with backward compatibility into 2012, which is kind of how Wizards is doing it. As far as other rule systems, this is something we spend a lot of time talking about. We really want this, like our goal with the company isn't to make money. This is not, you don't start an indie game company to make money. You start an indie game company to lose money and have a great time while you're doing it. So our goal really is to get this into the hands of as many DMs as possible, and we have a special affinity towards any Egyptomaniacs and Egyptophiles, right? But also new DMs. We're trying to make it very accessible to new DMs, people that haven't DM'd yet and are a little nervous about it and want to, because we're going to provide a lot of support. We're going to have at least monthly, if not bi-weekly, live stream like this one, where we're going to answer questions for DMs and try to provide as much support as possible to help them run their game. And we've thought about porting it over to other systems. And so our product is really the setting, which is the kingdom, a little bit about the kingdom, 10% about the kingdom of Keshnar, like 10% about the world, which is Orthain, 10% about the kingdom of Keshnar. But most of it is like the city of Keshnar, the capital city. And it is a very dense, very comprehensive city that we've built. In a lot of campaigns, you keep moving around, right? Because you go to the village and then you do the 5 things you can do there, but then there's not really much more to do, so you have to go to the next place. Well, in Keshanar, you can game there for a year, right, or more, because there's 200 locations. We've actually built the entire city, building by building, 25 million square feet in the Unreal Engine. That's our map, and so it's kind of it's using a video game engine, but it's not a video game because there's nothing to do there except run around this whole city that we built. With architects extrapolating off of ancient Egyptian architectural styles. There's 200 detailed locations in there, each with plot hooks, different plot hooks and cultures and factions and, just everything. And so it's incredibly rich. And we're trying to make it like you can just spend all your time in this one city if you want, or you can go out into the desert. The desert's really cool. There's a lot of great stuff out there too. New monsters and spells and what have you. But as far as porting it to other game systems, the city itself is very portable. And so we're considering just pulling that out and making that available for, RuneQuest or Dungeon Crawl Classics or whatever, just as a city setting that someone could just plunder and drop into their home campaign, right? Which of course you could do with your 5e campaign. You can just plunder our stuff and use it how you like, stick it somewhere in your world, because all great DMs, they already have a world, right? And but some new ones are looking for that. So we're kind of trying to serve both those needs. But the campaign and the lore is really very dialed into the kind of the D&D universe.
Okay, this is right up there then when somebody posts an Amazon link and I have to put my disclaimer that this is in no way, shape, or form me supporting Wizards of the Coast.
Nor me. I appreciate the fact that they have made big chunks of that IP publicly available. I think that's a huge move on their part, and it's also smart because it expands the table. It gets more people interested in the game, and I think it serves their purposes ultimately. They are a corporation, so they're, I don't know if I should say this. I'm going to have to bleep it out. I just signed up for a Facebook chat, and they said, "Is Hasbro the ultimate evil?" I'm like, no. It might be lawful evil, just like any corporation, but they need to get a return for the shareholders, and that's their mandate, right? And and if you had 80% of your net wealth as stock in Hasbro, you'd want them to do the same thing, So that's why I really appreciate the fact that they're allowing us to create third-party content. I think that's big. So we're always a little nervous about that and try to tiptoe around all those issues to make sure that we don't get in trouble or cause any problems for ourselves or for any of the other indie game studios that are developing third-party content.
Yeah, I did not. I actually started the show in part because I knew so many people that wanted to get away from Wizards of the Coast products after the Pinkerton incident.
Yeah.
Not even after the whole changing the rules thing, but the Pinkerton thing really bothered a lot of people, including me. So, someone asked, how would reincarnation work within the game?
Oh man, that is a really good question. So
I'm actually going to shrink you back down in case other panel members have questions too.
Yeah, so there's a deep lore reason why you can only reincarnate people so far back. which I can't reveal, but if you run through the entire campaign, you'll figure it out after you get to the third campaign book, because we're running it all 1 through 20. But I think the most immediate interesting impact of that is death is not like, so usually in all the games I've ever run in, you die, and then you either roll up another character or you sit around until they can resurrect you, and then you're back, right? Death actually is kind of an experience in Keshnar, because the ancient Egyptians were fascinated with death, like obsessed with death. And so when you die, you go before Anubis to be judged in Duat, the underworld, which isn't really a hell. It's and interestingly, like the symbol for Duat often was painted in the ceilings of the tombs, a circle with a star in it, all over the stars all over the ceilings, and Duat itself is a circle. And actually, our lore kind of feeds heavily into that. Our lore really connects the D&D universe through Keshnar and ancient Egypt canon, like really nicely. And it's fascinating in that respect. And that's our secret sauce. That's what we're really selling here, because that's fueling everything that we do. So the first thing happens is you have to go in front of Anubis and you have to be judged. And Anubis, I have a pair of scales here. I should have brought them down. He puts your heart on the scale, one side of the scale, and the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of cosmic balance, on the other. And if the weight of your sin is determined by the sin you've carried in your heart, because they believed that your soul was in your heart, everything was. They didn't even know what the brain was, which is just a bunch of goo that's filling up your head just because there's an empty space in there, is greater than the feather. Then Anubis would take the heart and feed it to Amit, his monstrosity pet with the crocodile head and the hippo body and bits of lion, and she would eat it, and you'd be destroyed. It isn't quite that simple in our universe. It's like we kind of pick it up a little bit from there, but then you get resurrected. Like either you're going to Eru, like the good place, or you have to stay in Duat, the bad place. Either way, when you get resurrected, you're getting resurrected with a lesson, right? And so now there's this really, really active, frothy relationship between the underworld and their prime material planet and Orthane, to the point where like all the clerics, we call them Ratharans, of like the Temple of Anubis, are constantly debating like, well, how much does one sin weigh? What can I actually get away with? So like if I cheat on my wife, is that an automatic fail? And then so they start to run. They're starting to compare notes from people that have come back based on kind of how they lived their life and trying to figure out, and game this. You might appreciate that as a statistician, right? Right, Neil. And so it's an interesting. That's a really good question. So death is definitely not the end in Keshnar. It's an interesting. We had to write a whole section of the book about what happens when you die and what your experiences of it.
I have a question, because this is something. There's another project, the Black Ballad, for anyone who's heard of it. And the gist of that thing is essentially like you all play people who have died, and you are now in whatever the major city of the underworld is, because I don't remember and I don't have it to hand. Is that kind of adventure something you would consider adding to the setting, particularly since death is such an important part of taking people, whether there was a TPK and everyone wants to keep playing their characters, or if it's just I don't want to deal with anything going on in the actual material world, we're going to have an adventure in not hell. And maybe when you all reach a higher level, part of the award you get is like, okay, go back and try it again.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because the whole third book happens in Duat. The whole third book, level 5 through 20, happens in the underworld, because you start to figure out more and more about what's really going on, and then what your potential role in it could be as a party, and and then the great moral conundrums that arise from that, and what have you. And so like that's where the big consummation of what's really happening here, that's the big reveal. But we drop hints all along the way, and it's going to be fun to watch our fans and our players like start to figure it out. Because man, we are drawing like the Egyptophiles out of the woodwork from people that still actually truly do worship, Anubis and a lot of the ancient Egyptian gods, in which way we're going to be profoundly respectful about how we treat that material. Sensitivity reading, we have an Egyptian PhD Egyptian, Egyptologist is part of our sensitivity reading, because people, this lore and this theology these religions are important to people. So we don't want to just like, muddy foot trot all over it. We got to be respectful. But then I've had like, I had a a comment from somebody recently. It was like, my eyes are broken, they're leaking, I don't know what's going on, about how his wife was like really a big, Egyptophile, and she was studying to be an Egyptologist, and she just passed away tragically, and he's by the game, he's going to run it in her honor. It's like, wow. That's exactly why we're doing this. We're doing this to because there's been a lot of cool Egypt themed stuff out there, a lot, and not just Tracy Laura's Desert of Desolation. It's been a number of things that I think are Egyptian in terms of their aesthetics, right? Which is cool. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great, and the material is, I'm sure, very good. We're just crazy, right? So we're going much deeper. That's why we hired an Egyptologist, and I'm constantly having arguments with her about things. And also, when I went to Egypt, it was fascinating. Actually, a lot of my actual lore, comes from 16 years old, reading deities and demigods back to back, and then the next one also, and so like when I went over to Egypt, they have an official line, so all of their guides are trained a certain way to believe a certain thing. And it's different. There's differences, big difference between how the Western Egyptologists interpret that than the Eastern ones, the actual Egyptian ones. And so, for instance, one of them is when I went to Abu Simbel, which is you'd recognize it if you see it. It's the Temple of Ramses II or III. Huge statues up in the front, and then one day of the year, like I think a spring equinox, the light goes right down the center of it, and in the back there's 4 statues, and there's a statue of Ptah, and a statue of Ramses, and I forget who the other ones are. But when the guide told me that, oh yeah, Ptah, he's the god of darkness, and I'm like, what? Ptah's the god of of architects and builders and designers, right? He is kind of the designer of the universe. And he's like, oh no, we were, for us, he's the god of darkness. And I'm like, that isn't like Osiris or Set or something. And I said, why is that? Oh, because when that light shines down the middle of Abu Simbel and the sun starts to move, it starts at the right statue, and then it lights up the right one, and then the left one, and then the last one, which is Ramses, and then it gets to Ptah and it blinks out. So it was never designed to shine on him. Therefore, he's the god of darkness. And so there's just a lot of stuff like that when we went there and really dug in, that is adding really interesting color and also controversy, with our, with our Egyptologist. And also we got invited to go to an actual Egyptology conference next month, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's very neat. So I do actually raise goats, hence the avatar. And at one point in time, I was working on a book about how goats fit in with early human civilization, because the domestication of goats is actually older than most civilizations. And one of my points of interest was that the Sumerians were like the first major civilization, and their main god was the goat god Enki, who is creation and life and fertility, and then when Egypt sort of began to come in, a lot of the gods are borrowed from the Sumerian religions, except that Enki is relegated to like almost nothing, because they are so into this kind of underworld and afterlife. Like, those gods became much more important. So it's really cool that all of those gods are kind of incorporated in that way into your game. That's really neat. Because I think we're still kind of in this habit of avoiding the gods of death and and just looking at the here and now kind of thing. So that's kind of neat. Anything else you think that we should know, Major, or shall we?
I appreciate the time, and I don't want to capitalize. I'd like to hear more about what Neil's working on, and I'm happy to take any questions or.
Okay.
Actually, if you don't mind, I do just have one question before we get into you, Neil. So Dave, for the setting and just your books and the world building and everything involved, kind of what would you say kind of the percentage split is between how much fantasy aspect is there to how grounded in realism and reality the setting would be? Like, for example, somebody that's playing the setting would characters see, I don't know, like a dragonborn walking around, is that something like not too uncommon, or like is it primarily human and human-esque people that are living in this setting to kind of more mirror the whole Egyptian theme that you have going on?
I love that question. So, what's weird about the Egyptian gods? 70% of them have animal heads, right? They share features with insects and animals. And so in Keshanar, if you share features with an animal like tabaxi or a minotaur or name it, right? Like just practically any D&D species, right? Then you're revered, except for the one you mentioned, right? The Dragonborn, because they share features with Apep, and Apep's feared because Apep's the great god of destruction, who might have been an original inspiration, like 5,000 years ago for dragons. So they fear dragons. And so all of these species are called Celestiu, like touched by the divine. And so if you're like a Shaketi, which is like the dog head kind of Anubis-like creature, playable, right, species, and there's a family of them, their children are probably going to be Shaketi. But also spontaneously out of nowhere, a birth between just two humans could result in a Celestiu child also. And nobody really knows why that is, but again, it all goes back to the master lore of how we've tied the D&D universe to, my vision of what Keshanar is, and then also now with my co-writers, which are super influential, and to ancient Egyptian lore. And so there is a master lore, which we double NDA people into. Like even our raiders don't know what it is. They only know bits. There's only a handful of people to know what it is, because we want them to write from the perspective of the people, and the people don't know, right? So that's a great question. And so I would say that it's like pretty a lot, because they had spells, right? I mean, the Book of the Dead is the book of spells. That's 125 is the spell that Anubis had to cast in order to do that balancing act with the feather and the heart, and actually make the determination of whether you were worthy of, bliss or eternal damnation, right? And so that's not that unusual. And they buried their dead, and like they had spells to prevent the undead from coming back to life. And so it's another thing in Keshanar is like necromancy is not a bad thing. So they take the skeletons of prisoners and fallen in combat and what have you, and they reanimate them, and they use them to like clean the streets. And so they're called duskers, and so they're walking around all over the place. You can get them to walk your dog, hold a sign for you, bartend very poorly, trim the hedges. They're everywhere, right? So necromancy is like an everyday sort of thing to them, because the veil between life and death is so very thin, right? Because so many people have come and gone back and forth, and it's a reality. It's not we've never had anybody, to our knowledge, right, come back and tell us what happens after we pass on. But in Keshanar, it happens all the time. So
I've
it's
been
pretty
watching White Zombie, and it kind of where they have all the zombies that are working manual labor. It made me think of that when you said that.
Yeah, but that's a fantastic question. So it's amazing how these two canons feed and fuel each other and fit together so beautifully. So it doesn't diverge too much. Of course, it has all like the D&D spells, right, and species, but they'll fit in perfectly. And we just call them like cat Celestiu, dog Celestiu, or we have our own names for them. So we're never introducing all these new species. So we don't run roughshod over the Egyptian lore. I don't think at all, but I'm sure we do a little. But because at the end of the day, if we have to make a decision, it's going to be what makes for the most interesting experience for our players.
Of course, yeah. But it sounds like you guys definitely found a good synergy, and I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have even been able to guess that an Egyptian setting and Egyptian lore and background would synergize so well. So good on you guys, and best of luck with all that. I look forward to it myself.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's and like my a friend of mine who has been in the game for 2 years. He's play tested it 1 through 20 twice over the past 5 years. It takes 2 years to get all the way through it. Brilliant guy, high paying job. With the company, just quit so he could come help me do this. he's an idiot, but
That's
you know,
it's
I was like,
dedication.
"This
But
can
we
I come
do.
die on this hill with you?" Yes. But that's how excited we are about the core mythos of what we've created. And now the work is, of course, trickling it out and letting that define how everything gets built in the campaign. Right. But it's not like Lost. The first season of Lost was amazing,
Dave,
and then it got better. And then you get towards the end, it's like, we never thought we would get another season or had to actually think about how all this ends. So they just Deus Ex Machina, and it was crap, at the end. No, we have an arc of narrative for this thing that could go in a whole bunch of different directions too. That is going to keep players hooked and DMs really intrigued and engaged throughout all three of the campaign books if they choose to actually play it.
well, thank you very much. We do need to move on, otherwise, poor Comic Stat is going to have been here for no reason. We're going to run out of time. So,
No, we're good. I'm not nearly as important or have as much to share as these two guys do. So I'm just here for the hangout. Really, it's all good.
but thank you very much. It sounds fascinating. One of the reasons that I wanted to do it is people were talking about how many games are either Greek based or Norse based, and they kind of wanted something different. So that's pretty cool. Neil, why don't you tell us about Army Men?
Absolutely. Brief aside before we start, just listening to Dave talk, I didn't want to take any time away from him, but it reminds me of a lot of what I did with my own D&D 5e fantasy setting. I have a place called Maud City of Bones, and it was the reference you made of it's run by a guild of necromancers, and they actually have undead who handle all of the manual labor in the city. So I had that, I was like, great minds. But anyway, on to my other D&D 5e project, or at least it started as a 5e project of Army Men, a game of tactical plastic. And as folks who can see in my background, it is a game of living plastic people in a living plastic war. And it is one of those of everything in the world is, a resinous person of some variety. They have the animals, they have the giant insectoid creatures called Vespoids, which are the main antagonists you start out dealing with. There's all of the other nations that they're having political disagreements and occasionally very violent disagreements with, as a reference to the toys of each of the different colors was supposed to represent a different military or real world nation, etc. And lots of people who've seen the game make the very obvious assumption of it's either a tabletop continuation of the video games that we got for the I don't think they were actually connected to Toy Story. It was just the feeling that we got. Or, they're wondering, like, are you taking over, like the kids' room and eventually trying to move out into the rest of the house? It is a valid way to play the game if that is what you want to do. But the way the lore is written is all of the folks that you see are person-sized. They are, living resinous folks who are just trying to go about their lives and fight their wars. But that brief pitch aside, of the purpose of the game is everyone is a trooper, essentially. You're part of one of the nations of the Plastos Federation, or you're a part of the Federation itself. And you form a squad, and your squad is given assignments by command. It is one of the things that I thought was very clever. Of lots of times, anyone who has been a game master knows there's going to be players who 3 of them are really gung-ho and they're here to do whatever the adventure is. And then there's Jeff off in the corner who wants to be dragged along, or they just want to stay in the bar and drink. They don't actually want to participate. They have no actual reactions to the hooks you give them. This game kind of takes that off of your player's shoulders and off of your shoulders as the game master. It's why are we doing this? Because command ordered you to. That is what happens. And that structure provides a lot of interesting things you can do with the adventures as they unfold. One of them being if somebody either can't make it one week or their character dies, and you don't have to go through that whole rigmarole of how do we work in a new party member, of you got assigned a replacement, after your comrade fell violently in combat. And then you get back together and you take on whatever your next mission is. And this philosophy sort of goes through a lot of the other ways I constructed the game that I think we've just never questioned certain aspects of how Dungeons and Dragons works. And this goes back multiple editions now. There's things like there's always loot. There's usually some variety of major threat you're dealing with, and they're usually unconnected, at least in older editions. You get level 1 to 5, you get yourself nice and beefy, then you get to the actual plot that you're dealing with. Whereas in Army Men, you can still do that if you want to, but if you, as the game master, want to have your squad uncovering various conspiracies, you want to have them taking on multiple missions that get them closer and closer to an actual threat, you can also do that. It's meant to be a central structure as a game that you can go in various different directions with, and you can play all sorts of different genres, if you will. As an example, folks who look at the starting book, you get the base book. It has that very World War II sort of feeling, and that is kind of the era we start off with. Of some of the weapons may be a little more advanced, some of the concepts may be a little more active than that, but it was kind of the time period I wanted to emulate and the feeling I wanted folks to have, because those are the toys we're used to. And if I'm honest, they're also the toys you're sort of meant to use as miniatures. Even better if you don't paint them, because everybody is these various colors in World, so
That's
unpainted
brilliant.
is actually better for this game.
That's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. But it's also why so many of the other things in the game, and I'll get into the backstory of this in a moment. It's why they look like cheap knockoff toys from the dollar store, because that was the intention of, I wanted to make a game where the most expensive thing you had to buy overall was the book. Because I know we all have like the cheap, like gray plastic spiders that you can get for 25 cents a bag, or we have those weird little alien toys that were $2 for 100 of them, however many it was, or we have those little plastic Halloween decorations if you want to have zombies or you want to have like weird dragon creatures, whatever it is. And the idea was, rather than those being the fill-ins that we're so used to seeing, of because our GM either couldn't afford the big fancy miniatures that Wizards was putting out, or they didn't have the time or the energy to do a full painted army, these are world and game accurate. This is what you're looking at. And I thought that sort of added to the meta fun of it. Excuse me. But just as the game is meant to be flexible in terms of genre, I mentioned several times throughout the book of, you can use this to run a gritty war campaign where everybody is doing a serious Band of Brothers kind of thing, of you're fighting off a major threat to your homeland, and there's pathos, and there's the bonding of people out in battle. You can do a zany, ridiculous, like 1980s action movie style game where you're just throwing hand grenades everywhere and everyone has terrible one-liners, and no matter what it is, you manage to survive it even though it should have killed you 10 times over. You can do cops and robbers style games where you get involved in actual just dealing with syndicates or dealing with war criminals, things happening more on the home front. Or you can do spycraft style games. You can get involved in all of the jockeying for position, all of the machinations going on amongst the various nations, as each of them tries to seize the advantage while also not giving up on the front, where there are in fact giant insects trying to eat the entirety of your cities. And I wanted to leave it very open for folks so that I could sort of look at the audience reaction and see, what did they want? What direction did folks want me to go in? Whether it's they wanted a more tactical, more miniatures based approach going forward, or did they want more story? Did they want more lore? Did they want more alternate ways to play, sort of building off the base book? And that's kind of the position we're in right now, which is, I won't say stagnant, but it is one of those where we're trying to figure out which direction we want to move in and what resources we have to commit to that direction, because you don't want to pick the direction you're going in and then find out it was just 5 really vocal supporters and now you've kind of dug in your trench and you can't undo this decision.
I mean, this speaks to me so hard. Like, I was before I got into D&D, I was, or kind of around the same time, was a huge war game geek, but board game style, like, Cross of Iron and all the Avalon Hill stuff, Wooden Ships and Iron Men, and especially World War II. And then, spend years playing Steel Panthers and being like an instructor playing Steel Panthers. And I can remember to this day, the first army set that I got, and how I was 5 years old, knew where I was living. I'm waiting for it, ordered it at the back of a comic book. It was that classic one in the back of the comic book stuff. I think this is kind of genius. I just bought it on Drive-Thru RPG because there are so many different ways you can go with it. And, Toy Story doesn't hurt, having that kind of iconic thing. And plus, like I said, it lends itself well to historical reenactment, or you can do something silly with it. Here's my question. How long has it been out? And do you one shot at cons?
It has been out roughly a year. We finished our Kickstarter and we had it go up officially on Drive-Thru RPG, I want to say last February. I do not personally one-shot it at cons, but I did not do this game all by myself. I worked with High Level Games, Josh Heath, and the crew from that particular area. So I know that they are one-shotting it at cons, because I don't do as many gaming cons myself nowadays as I used to. I'm mostly doing like author events and things like that, so there isn't a game room for me to post up in. But I have a couple of shows. If I do make it back to, I am planning on running at least the introductory module that's in the book. But I'm also this year, part of what I'm actually doing is I am not a person who loves writing modules, mostly because I know like 6 people are going to play them, and of those 6, 2 might actually write a review. But I feel this is a game that demands at least a handful of missions to really set the tone for game masters, because so much of what goes into making a mission for Army Men does not use what you would think of as standard RPG logic. Of, as I mentioned, of everybody is like recruited to one of the armed forces of these various countries. But another thing that we do of like, there's no loot. You're fighting giant bugs. There is no tomb to raid. There is no, stuff to pick up from, fallen enemies beyond the mission you're actually involved in. So part of the way that we set the challenge for it is you essentially have a recommended gear allotment. Gear is very important to characters in this game. And a game master who's reading whatever the mission is can decide, like, I want to make this a little easier. And you can give them either more equipment, or you can give them, access to stuff they wouldn't normally have if you want to take the difficulty down a bit. Or you could have one of those of like, no, I want this to be hard. And so you restrict the amount of equipment they start with, and then players have to sort of play a balancing act of, we only have 2 magazines each and we are deep in enemy territory. Do we want to get involved in this firefight? How many other enemies is this going to draw? Or if you, as a game master, want to make it like, no, we're going to make this big and bombastic and silly. So now you find you're having shootouts in ammo depots, so you can just grab handfuls of grenades out of a crate and throw them at your enemies. Or there's just mounted machine gun turrets you can jump into for that section we're all fans of in first-person shooters. And you can sort of adjust the experience accordingly to either what you want to do or what you think your players are going to enjoy, because both of those scenarios are the ideal game for somebody. The question is, are they all at the same table?
Unless you're like the Allied commandos that are waiting for the Nazi train filled with all the stolen French art, and you have to go recuperate it. That could be a loot one. I have one question. How do you deal with hit points? Like, because usually getting shot's a bad thing. It's kind of, you're done, right? But like with 5e, so I mean, and you're not a person, right? You're literally a plastic army man. Yep. So you've got a lot of hit points. You can take a lot of damage.
It's kind of my I had a word for it and then it flew out of my head, but it's kind of part of the conceit of like, you are all resinous persons. So hit points work the same way as they do in standard 5th edition, but it is one of those, we have a medic, I almost said class, cast is what we name them because I love puns, but it's part of the joke of, and again, this will depend at least partially on the kind of tone you want to go for, of you can have the very like over the top, not necessarily gore, it would still be Technicolor, you'd still have like melted plastic, or you'd have parts blown off of people if that's the way you want to play it. And that's really more of edging towards quote unquote realism, or more of a horrific angle. But most of the time it's like you get like deep scratches, and you have to be filled in with like additional resin to get you back on your feet. And that's kind of, part of the conceit is like, it is still meant to be a tactical combat game, but there is that aspect of like, if you don't want to get deep into treating bullet wounds or dealing with like being hit by a flamethrower, you can have your medic just take out a literal caulk gun and repair people to the point where they can get back up on their feet and get back into the fight.
Nice.
Yeah, that was going to be my question too. It was just because I do love the flexibility of it. You could be as serious or as tongue-in-cheek with it as you want. Like your medic, and not even a caulk gun, literally just carrying around maybe just a tube of glue and just glues a leg back on or something.
Yeah, and it is. I wanted to do extended rules for some of this, because for the base book, obviously, as I'm sure as Dave knows, among other folks, of you can't put everything in. There comes a point where you have to make that decision of like, this is not a main book thing, this is a supplement, or this is another book, mechanical structure we're going to use, because it's not necessary from where we're starting. But it is a thing I wanted to do. I wanted to have additional options for game masters and players of like, hey, here's what happens when you take critical hits. You could, lose a limb, or you could, deal with this other issue. And then you could have, additional exploits is what I renamed the feat system to. And it is now mandatory. Everybody gets exploits because they're fun, and I love feat trees. But it is a thing of like, you could use part of that to reconstruct yourself. Or if I get to a point where I release one of the supplements I really wanted to do, but I just haven't been able to justify working on yet, which was going to be Army Men Weird War. You could get, additional technological upgrades if you wanted to bring in, cybernetic prosthetics, or you wanted to deal with specifically engineered pieces for like super soldier characters. That would be a way that you could bring those into the party, and then ask yourself other questions like, what happens when the untested thing you got from games in theory goes wrong because nobody's taken it out into the field yet?
Yeah, it's just as you were talking about the system and the design and just kind of all the different ways that you can go about it. 5-year-old me was sitting here and going, "Okay, I can set one guy up over on the bookshelf, and we'll treat this as the clock tower." And I was just kind of reliving playing with Army Men myself, and also like one game or one session if you run it as one shots, it could be like World War II reenactment, and then the very next one, it could be Starship Troopers with Army Men.
Mm-hmm. And that was part of what I was. Oh, go ahead. It was part of what I was hoping to do. Is while it's perfectly possible to do just a get everybody together and run a traditional campaign where we follow our same squad of battle hardened veterans as they go through and they accomplish all these missions and they win medals and awards, as I do have a supplement out of Army Men Medals of Honor, because you don't get to really keep your equipment from mission to mission. So if you achieve certain things like in game or in the field, you get a medal, and that will have an in game social aspect to it. But there's also usually it gives you a new ability, or it unlocks this other perk that you normally wouldn't have. So it was a fun little thing I wanted to do. But it's you can do all of those things and just go in any direction you want with it. But for the other part of the 5-year-old and all of us, there's one question that everyone has asked me, and I want to get to it before anyone brings it up, is yes, there are dinosaurs. Yes, we have stats for them. and at some point in time, I wanted to put together I was either going to do it in Motor Pool, or I was going to do it in another follow-up that was going to be cavalry specific. And I would have the rules for like, okay, so you wanted to ride the Triceratops into battle. Bold move. Here's some stuff that you need to do to make that work.
Well, it's great that you said that, because coincidentally, I do have a 5-year-old, and she absolutely is bananas over dinosaurs. So this might be the thing to get her into TTRPGs. So,
and
it. Go ahead.
I was just no, it was fine. There's another question in the chat I wanted to make sure I got to. That's all. But
by all means.
As your GM asked, are there options for play without a grid or hex map? Can you just use rulers and makeshift terrain?
You theoretically could do that.
Can you Warhammer it?
as a 40K fan myself, I am more into the lore than the mechanics, but it is one of those of if you have the math handy for what a grid map distance would be, then yes. The distances are all given in inches, so if you wanted to do it that way, you absolutely could. And yeah, for folks who are interested in the war game aspect of it, I'll tell a brief story about how we got into this part of it. I added in and changed a lot of tactical rules to make it more crunchy in that aspect. As an example of there's sections and additions for things like, hey, we're firing from prone, because that's a smart thing to do. But I wanted to do more than just the standard 5th edition rules of like, well, like, it's hard to hit you and you have negatives to attack other people. We're done. So now we have, additional exploits you can take or class features that, make you better, in certain positions. They give you more benefits if you have partial or full cover. There's certain weapons that are specifically made for getting rid of cover. And I wanted to go a little deeper with it because I am one of those folks who very much enjoys the crunchy map-based like combat grid aspect. And I figured anyone picking this up seeing like it's a game all about army men, I am assuming that they want to move around all the figures on the map, and they want to figure out like where are my sight lines and can I actually hit this character from here, and all of those other aspects that make the crunchy little parts of our hearts happy.
Yeah.
But part of why we ended up with that is the inspiration for this game was many years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago now. I was essentially put on retainer by a friend of mine who wanted to start a gaming company, during quarantine and whatnot. And I was like, all right, that sounds cool. And then I waited and I was like, oh, you mean you wanted me to work for you now that you're opening this company? And so part of what he wanted to do is he originally asked me to write blogs for his website and get some content out there. But then he said, hey, I want to put out an RPG. And I was like, that sounds great. What do you want it to be about? And we hemmed and hawed a bit, and he didn't really know what he wanted, but he knew the audience he wanted to appeal to. He essentially wanted, the wargaming crowd. He wanted folks with their tiny space marines or their little, planes going out and having dogfights. And his original pitch to me was, he wanted to make a RPG using the Fate system. And then that was the first time I'd actually like looked at my boss and said, like, no, you're not going to get people with massive pools of dice and rulers and all of these, specific things to play an RPG that has, if we're being generous, 4 rules. And so we went back and forth on, did we want to make our own system? Did we want to use an existing system? And we eventually settled on 5th edition because at the time it was still riding high as the dominant game. And it felt like a really bad move to try and make a game that wasn't at least 5th edition compatible. And while we were trying to figure out what we were going to do for a war game, I was running out of ideas and I was getting really frustrated. And I was just sitting there in the shower, just like having my shower thoughts time. And I had said at some point in time under my breath, I was just go to the dollar store and I'll buy a bag of Army Men and I'll throw them down on the table and that'll be the game. And then I stopped and I went, that has to be an RPG. Someone must have made that by now. And it turns out there were a lot of miniatures games for it, but there weren't really any actual RPGs like focused on playing living plastic army men. So I was like, well, I have a dumb idea. Let's see how much rope he's going to give me for this. And it eventually got made.
Well, I will be perfectly honest. I initially thought that this was a minis game because that seemed...
Most folks do.
In fact, I think I actually put it in the description that way, so I'm going to have to go back and change it for the rewatches.
Well, I mean, you have like religion and culture and stuff in there. So, I mean, it's definitely, oh, by the way, I saw the plastique. Another D4 psychic damage. Yeah. And so so I guess you could run it as little plastic army men, but then that kind of culture, that lore that you've created, the world you created around that, fighting ants and things. But you could also just flat out use it as sort of a weird universe World War II reenactment too.
Yeah, and it has always been my hope. It was partially inspired by Spycraft for anyone who's played that particular game, but getting way back into like the 2.0 like GM section for that game, there's like, I want to say nearly 20 pages where each page is just, here's advice on running a different genre version of this game. So you'll have like, here's a tactical wartime simulator. Here's writing like military horror where experiments are going awry and you're fighting old ones and whatnot. And, here's Hong Kong action theater and here's 80s action movies, which are similar, but, 2 different genres. And I wanted to kind of capture part of that so that folks could buy the one game. And after they played it the one way, it's like, well, for the next campaign, why don't we try this other thing and make it slightly different? And so they can have lots of the same things they're used to, whether it's, the system and the exploits and the general setup, but they can have just wildly different swings as far as like what they're doing. So it never feels like you're just going through the same campaign the same way.
So same question I had for the other fight. Is this 5e compatible? Or is this a supplement?
It started as a supplement. If you buy the base book, it has all the rules you need to run the game. You do not have to use any other places to find 5e rules. If you have the book, you're welcome to bring stuff in. I will say there was a small oversight that we hit during editorial. I had expected the more traditional like D&D fantasy medieval weaponry to be in the list, and it is not. So I'm gonna have to go back and do like a whole like getting medieval book just for an additional spread of melee weapons for folks who want to go on hard mode. But if you have D&D stuff, with the exception of magic for the time being, it won't really work because we have not We have not introduced that portion yet, which is, my wink and a nudge of there is a plan for that. I just need to eventually expand the world and the game till we get to that meta concern where we run into, well, where is the magic in this setting?
I mean, one of the reasons I hadn't realized that yours was 5e either was because I have a very hard time in my brain going from like, oh, here's a world with magic and wizards, and we're transferring that to military with guns and, and no magic.
And I will say, like, that is part of what I wanted to do. Of for folks who do love the puns they've heard thus far, oh, they're gonna get real bad when we expand beyond the borders of. I'll just give a preview here because maybe it'll get folks more interested, and I can eventually get the sport to get to this point. But what I wanted to do is when I started the book, there's the Plastos Federation. We have all of its borders, and we get a rough idea of the nations and their culture and whatnot. But I left. Yes, yeah, Acrylica is a surprising favorite. I didn't expect everyone to like them as much. But it's one of those of once you expand beyond those borders, I kind of left it empty for game masters to be like, and there's dinosaurs over here, and just weird like half melted armies of undead resinous peoples over here, and this other type of Vespoid, because we didn't get my favorite insect, so now we're going to make a new version of it for you to fight. But there is, in fact, a kingdom of other folks who are not resinous, but they are actually made of metal. And my joke for that is like, these are the old-fashioned pewter minis that we originally played D&D with. So this is where you get all of your mounted knights and like their sorceress masters and whatnot. And then we have that question of like, okay, we have a grunt with a machine gun versus a wizard. I hope one of you rolls really good initiative because the other's going to get wrecked.
That is so meta. So instead of taking a 5e character and using a pewter mini to represent it, you're playing the pewter mini itself, representing the character. Wow.
Pewter minis are the only proper minis.
Yeah, and then you have, like the additional things you could do at that point, because I would, of course, introduce like they wouldn't be resins, but that's the category they'd fall into of, you'd have pewter, you'd have like, printed or various other, copper, probably lead because, lead is traditional. And then you have that question of once the cultures have clashed and interacted, what happens when they start interacting with each other? So could you have, a green army man who like learns the sorceress rites of this other kingdom? Or do you have like a lead knight who just puts on like a tactical vest and has someone explain to him like, this is a grenade launcher. And then you just have him like running through combat on his noble steed, just blasting anything that gets in his way. Just full heavy metal nonsense is what I was hoping to do with that one when we eventually get to that point.
Yeah, I hear that the Real Partha is making a comeback with the whole pewter minis thing.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
It's because they're awesome.
They were.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like I'm still, when it comes to BattleTech, I'm still stuck in, metal minis and, the original. None of that clan stuff. That's too easy. Make my life more miserable, please.
Speaking of people making their lives more miserable, if you wanted to do another alternative impression of this, because it was an article I did a while back on improved initiative for anyone who reads my blog, but it was a kind of running gag I had of if you really want to play Imperial Guard for Warhammer 40k, but you don't want to invest in learning another system and you're more of a 5e person, you could easily take the resins I'd introduced and use them as members of like major worlds within the Imperium that we've already had. And here's rules for fighting giant insects if you just need to get your quota of Tyranids in for the day as a side effect for people who just want to grab that and do more than just the core game with it.
Are you also thinking like somebody's commenting here? First of all, the resin and evil. Ouch. But also, somebody's asking why wish you didn't go the 5e route. Have you thought about other system adaptations?
I have, and I talked with the crew that helped me put the game together for the Kickstarter and whatnot, and it basically boiled down to we picked the game we thought had the best chance of getting the widest support first, and then we were going to look at folks and be like, okay, what other systems would you like us to port this to? We'd suggested Savage Worlds was one of the big ones. There was it wasn't Castles and Crusades, but there was another, might have been Chivalry and Sorcery. I don't quite remember off the top of my head, but there was at least one percentile game that was suggested, and it was just one of those of we put out our listeners to try and see what people wanted to see from us, and mostly what we heard was crickets. So we figured, just keep going and hope for the best.
Well, we
As
hear
it
it's
is.
for us, it's
Uh,
all over the board. It's like everybody has their flavor, and so it's just an ROI thing. It's going to be really hard to make a really tight adaptation. I mean, any really committed GM, but regardless of system, can take great content like that and adapt it, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Savage Worlds got a lot of really good feedback when we presented it here.
It did.
Lo-
It is.
people
It
people
is.
weren't very familiar with it, but once they heard how it went, they were like, "Oh, that sounds interesting."
Yes, I will say Savage Worlds is probably the rules lightest game I will play with enthusiasm, and that is saying something for anyone who's ever shared a table with me for a rules light game.
Barbie Aryan Giants.
Oh, there were so many suggestions for other toys to make homages to, and I have notes on so many of them I wanted to do. But it is again, like you said, it's return on investment of
Yeah.
I can take it's that question of like, could we do this? We absolutely could. Could we do it in fast enough turnaround with enough money on either a Kickstarter or sales to pay our rent for the months it would take us to put it together? And that is unfortunately the issue we run into a lot, particularly with Army Men, though it's not the only project I have spinning.
Well, I have to assume that one of those is got to be a GI Joe adaptation. It's right there in front of you. So
Yes, I will say what I wanted to do for that specifically, again with Weird War, of I wanted to have my own super soldier, and that was going to be the option for playing the official GI Joe. So it's like you're slightly bigger than everybody else. You're slightly tougher. You have weird articulation that makes you odd to look at.
That's awesome.
Prophetic has entered the chat, swinging by saying with a match you could run a Cronenberg horror arc.
I had there was a mission that I have not written yet because it is specifically for Weird War when I get to that point. But it was what I mentioned earlier with the melters of you find an abandoned government lab out in the desert, and Resinous folks don't do well with what is the equivalent of Nevada's heat. And so you find yourself investigating this location and trying to figure out what it was for, why was it abandoned, which of us actually ran it, and you just find we don't know if they're other Resonance persons who have met like a horrible fate just wandering the desert, or if these are lab experiments that didn't quite work the way that we want. And yet now you have to deal with it, and you have lost communication with command, and you have no reinforcements coming. So hope for the best.
And fatigue starts setting in as you get more hypermobile.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions? We're at about 25 past 7. We'll throw up the link one more time for people who are interested.
Is appreciated.
All I gotta say is both Neil and Dave, both of you guys just being on here, me being a part of this panel, it makes me miss my TTRPG groups. Unfortunately, my wife and I, we haven't been able to really play with people. We don't really know know anyone out here where we live. We've been out here a few years, but we used to play online a lot. But like our group just kind of fell apart over the years. But now, like more than ever, both of your guys' systems and settings sound awesome, and I just kind of want to go out there and meet random people on the internet now. As weird as that sounds, to play these.
I know this feeling.
Every time I do one of these, I go, I'm only running 3 games a month right now. I could fit in a 4th, right?
I have room. Oh no, Divs, that interaction it reminded me of there was a friend of mine that sorry.
That's all right. I have 4 work deadlines in the next 6 weeks, and and this show twice a week, and 4 games or 3 games a month. I'm sure I could find. And the lambs will be born any day now, but I'm sure I could find time somewhere.
So those things will be done eventually.
But I want to do it now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was like for Comics Dad, it reminded me of an interaction I had with a who is now a good friend of mine, but it was just a guy I'd gone to high school with before, and he was working as a manager at a local restaurant. And I was chatting with my partner at the time about a game we were going to run, and he just got this sad look on his face. As I miss playing games, and I just looked at him and I went, "This whole time you didn't have a gaming group? I feel like a terrible friend. You're going to come and I'm going to introduce you to some more folks. Bring your dice. If you don't have any, we'll give you some."
Okay. Before we move on to Comics Dad, the chat has shifted quite a lot. So I would like to remind people, for anyone who didn't know, friend of the channel, Jacob Ironsides, has run into some housing issues. He and his parents, who are quite elderly, are being forced to move. The cost is going to be rather extreme, and they have very, very little in the way of resources or time. I'm very excited to say that in the time we have been running this stream, there's been about $600 raised. So he's at $825 on his Kickstarter. With only a half hour left, it's probably not likely, but I'd be super excited if we could get him over 900 by the time this is done. The link should be pinned to the top, and Eraserhead has been dropping it in the chat as well. So again, if everyone can pretend just for today that I'm actually monetized and move anything that you would have potentially donated to me to Jacob, I would very, very much appreciate it, because
I'll tell you what,
he's in need and I am not. At least not that much.
how much time do we have left in the chat? Half an hour?
About 35 minutes.
All right. Well, Orthane Productions will match anything that gets donated between now and the end of the.
Oh, that's so exciting! Awesome.
It's
all right.
Time stamped. You heard it here.
All right, everybody. Even if it's only $2, or $2.50 would make $5 even. Please, 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 please. I will, in fact, while Comics Dad is doing his thing, I will, in fact, go on and make a donation right now.
Yay!
So, yes, that is very exciting. Once again, thank you so much. That's very cool. Everybody's saying there are witnesses. All right. So, Comics Dad, take it away.
Yeah, so first and foremost, guys, just people in the chat, everybody on the panel, just let me know if you can see me a little bit better here. I'm not going to be able to see the screen, but I decided to Google just the word white. So I'm going to pull up just a white image on my screen to try to give the give a little bit as if I have an actual light illuminating me, because I know my lighting is not great.
That is genius. That never occurred to me.
So hopefully this works out pretty well. But I am not like Dave or Neil. I do not have any awesome TTRPG projects that I work on or anything. I'm just a guy that 3 months ago decided to say, hey, I want to read comic books on YouTube. But Goat has asked me to come on and just kind of share some stuff that I like playing. So specifically, there was a board game, a miniature board game that my wife and I stumbled upon couple of years ago that we really enjoy, and it's called Unmatched. So I have a lineup of a few sets that we have here, and they're multiplayer, basically quick, like 15-20 minute miniature battle games. And it's a lot of them are with mythical characters or folklore characters throughout history and different cultures. Like this one I'm holding up is Little Red Riding Hood versus Beowulf, almost as a what if these two characters and their allies had gotten together and decided to go at it.
Is that just because he has wolf in his name? Is that why they decided to put those two together?
It might be. It might very well be. But that
is the thing I didn't know I needed in my life until just now. So thank you for this.
You're very welcome.
All the gamers are addicted to puns, so.
And the miniatures are pretty cool. They come with sculpted but unpainted miniatures, but this one for, hopefully it's not too blurry or people can see pretty decently. This is the one for Red Riding Hood. Looks like she's got a little bit of a cowl on top, which is cool. And then this is the one for Beowulf. But I have a couple different sets here, and it plays pretty cool. So they have sets that are two characters where it's just 1 versus 1, and then they have like little minions or token sidekicks that you can place on the board. But then they also have larger sets. Like there's a Marvel set that has, I think, She-Hulk, Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange. And there's sets that have 4 characters, which are, I think, one contains Sherlock Holmes and a couple other folklore characters from various cultures across the world. But because it's just really me and my wife, we have specifically just the 2-player ones here, but they're really cool. So we got Little Red Riding Hood and Beowulf, which honestly is probably the one that we play the least, but the board for it is probably my favorite. So, which I pulled up here, because It's a pretty neat board, and it's double-sided. So you have, for people that want more color for the spaces, and the people that want to be able to see the actual environment. So it's like a Viking tavern or a Viking longhouse, but not as long, and then the outside. But people take turns. You take turns moving your main characters, and then if they have any sidekicks, there's usually like a little flat plastic token that you put on the board to represent the sidekicks. And you can do 3 things on your turn. You have to take 2 actions. And the actions you can take are you can maneuver, which is you have to draw a card, and then you can move your main character and your sidekicks up to a designated number of spaces. You can attack, which you have cards for. There are cards for attacking, and then there are also cards for defending. But then you can also play what's called a scheme, which basically it's like an action card or like an effect, a status effect type of thing that affects one character or multiple characters across the board. But you get pretty strategic with it, and it's pretty fun. So the way that combat works is if let's say, because I do have a couple other ones here, I have my favorite Robin Hood versus Bigfoot. So let's say, I dropped Robin Hood. He's dead. Okay. There we go. So let's say Bigfoot and Robin Hood are already right next to each other. Bigfoot doesn't have range, but Robin Hood does. Bigfoot needs to make an attack against Robin Hood. So I would put down an attack card if I have it in my hand. If I don't have an attack card in my hand, I obviously can't attack. But there are number values. So basically it's like a which number is greater type of deal. So if you attack, you place down an attack card with a value of 5. Your opponent has to place down a defense card if they have it in their hand, or a block card that is equal to or greater than the value of the attack card. And then sometimes the attack and defense cards will have effects that resolve either after or during combat. It's just all around, it's fun. I enjoy the miniatures. I enjoy the endless matchups. Like I said, Robin Hood is one of my favorite folklore characters. So Bigfoot versus Robin Hood is a good one. There is also a couple of Jurassic Park ones. One that's a 3-player one, I think, but this one is a 2-player one. It is T-Rex versus Dr. Statler, and her sidekick is Ian Malcolm. And that is my wife's favorite one because she loves Jurassic Park just like my daughter does. So just to give you guys an idea, here is the T-Rex, and here's Dr. Statler.
And even better, you could take that dinosaur and put it in a game of Army Men.
Exactly, there you go. And I was thinking about all of these too as you were talking about Army Men. I was like, I don't even need to go out and buy little cheap plastic Army Men from Dollar Tree or something. I have what I need in just Unmatched. But it's a lot of fun, and you can mix and match the characters out of the different sets. Like I can take Robin Hood and have Robin Hood fight Ian Malcolm and Dr. Statler if I really wanted to. And I could take the board from Little Red Riding Hood versus Beowulf. They also have, which if I had one of the sets that have 3 or 4 characters, there's also rules for team play. So if you have 4 people with a 4-character set, or at least a board that can accommodate 4 different characters, you can play as teams against each other too. So like you can do Spider-Man and T-Rex versus Bigfoot and Doctor Strange, or something like that. Just wild, crazy combinations. Obviously, you have to own all these different sets, but it's really cool. What I am excited about is I just found out before we started the show here tonight is that they have a Kickstarter, or are working on starting a Kickstarter for a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one. And I'm immediately going out and backing it as soon as I get the chance.
I have an unusual question for you, because this sparked a thing in my very old, deep memories. Do you remember Monsters in My Pocket?
I do. Very vaguely, but I do. Now that you said it.
It reminds me of the match battles that you could play with them with the weird numbers on their backs. Of you would each pick a different representative, and then you would put them on the field, and then you'd both turn around. So it becomes like a game of memory, trying to remember which of them is higher in the hierarchy.
Yeah, but wow, that takes me back now. I need to see if I could maybe find that somewhere in like a secondhand store or something. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and the characters, the main characters at least, they have health wheels. So this one is actually a Deadpool themed one, because they did, just as a little supplement, not a whole set with a board and everything, but they have a Deadpool themed one where it's just Deadpool's mini, and because each character has their own specific deck of cards for their actions, their schemes, their attacks, their defenses, stuff like that. So they put out a Deadpool one, and all the cards are exactly what you would expect from a Deadpool one. It is if he wrote on them or colored them himself, and it's just a lot of fun. They have some kind of a licensing deal with Marvel, I guess, because they have, I think, 3 sets of Marvel. But it's been one of my most favorite board games to play as of late. Especially with, like I said, my wife and I, we don't unfortunately play as many TTRPGs as we used to. So this is kind of a nice, healthy way to kind of at least get a little bit of that fix when it's just the two of us.
And now you can have Deadpool versus Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, exactly. And then just another comical thing. So this is the size of the Deadpool one, the size of pretty much every single health dial that the characters get. This is the one for the T-Rex. So just fits right there. But no, that's all I brought with me. I mean, it's just a really fun game. They are, as most board games seem to be nowadays, they are a little bit pricey depending upon the set you're looking at. Like the aforementioned Ninja Turtle one that they're going to be releasing, I saw their website. They have an initial sticker price of $80 for that one. So I mean, it can range, but if you get lucky enough, you can find these at various places for decent prices. I found my introduction to this was literally I stumbled across it on a whim in a secondhand store. If anybody is familiar with the chain Books A Million, they have another company under their umbrella called Second and Charles, where they sell new movies, board games, books, stuff like that. But they also sell secondhand used board games, books, movies, etc. that people just take to the store for either cash or store credit or what have you. So the very first 2-player set, which was Little Red Riding Hood and Beowulf, I actually found that at a secondhand store. So it was my introduction to it, and it's just a really, really fun game to play with a friend, a significant other, even your kids if they like just want to play with the little figures. But that's all I got, though.
So I had asked you about I've lost my train of thought here, about how it compared to Dice Throne, and you had not played Dice Throne. I'm wondering if anyone in the chat has played both of them and can answer that question.
Yes, that is correct. I've heard plenty about Dice Throne. It's just one of those games we've never picked up and had laying around the house.
I got a curiosity for how it compares to something.
Yeah.
Have you played HeroClix?
I dabbled in HeroClix way back when, yes.
So, like, what do you feel is the comparison?
But the comparison, I mean, honestly, the biggest comparison is probably just the fact that it's miniature games. Because HeroClix, you have the different abilities, and then you got the dials on them and everything. This is just the only dial you deal with is just for health. That's it, and it's all card based.
Yes, I wasn't sure if the cards made it more or less convoluted.
No, the cards are pretty straightforward, and they just the effects are pretty straightforward too. Like on one of the dead ones, well, the Deadpool ones probably aren't a great example because they're pretty wacky effects. But okay, there we go. So on one Deadpool one, it's a defense card, and it says after combat, move to any space in your zone. So, and what zones are is just the spaces, as you saw, they are color coded. So each zone is color coded. So, like if I was over in here, I would be in the yellow zone. So then I would be able to move to any other space that had yellow in it, even the ones that have 2 colors.
That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean it's a fairly straightforward game. It's just a lot of fun. Robin Hood and a lot of the characters have sidekicks. Like Robin Hood has his merry men. They're 4 little green flat plastic tokens. They're all just one damage each. So if you hit them, they die. Bigfoot has the jackalope as a sidekick, which is pretty fun. And like I said, Dr. Statler from Jurassic Park has Ian Malcolm, Mr. Jeff Goldblum as her sidekick. The only way that set would have been better is if Ian Malcolm was the main character, because who doesn't want to be Ian Malcolm or Jeff Goldblum?
So roughly how long does like a given session of like one-on-one take to get through?
I mean, with me and my wife, it could take anywhere from probably about 15 minutes to maybe 30. Especially if you're playing aggressively, because that's the other thing. You can move depending upon how much movement your character or your sidekicks have. You can play keep away, especially if you're getting low on health. If you space out or if you do your movements properly, so it can go a little bit longer. But typically, when we play it, about 15 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, so it's a good fill in, or for like an off RPG like board game night.
Oh yeah, it's definitely just a pick up and play kind of thing. You don't need to dedicate a whole night to it. I mean, unless if you have multiple sets like we do, and then you kind of just want to play with all the different characters and all that, then we can turn a night into it, or we can make a night out of it. But
So
yeah, it's
tournament
more just
battle.
a pick up and play if you got nothing better to do for like an hour. Yeah, tournament. Yeah, honestly, that's a great idea, because that's kind of how I see their rules for the team play. Because the team play is it's 2 versus 2, all the sidekicks and everything included. But as somebody gets knocked out, then they don't come back in, and it's kind of a free for all, but with teams. So a tournament idea would actually be really cool for this, so long as you had enough people around to play it.
So, pinning that for a later stream idea.
There you go. But yeah, that's all I got. Other than that, like I said, I mostly talk comic books on my channel, and I do a video game streams just a couple of times a week. And really, my channel is really just kind of a hobby and a pet project that has surprisingly grown pretty steadily over the last 3 months that I've been doing it. I mean, it's not like I'm hitting astronomical numbers or anything, but it's people are enjoying it, and I appreciate every single person that has gone over and subscribed to the channel and checked out what we do, and it's kind of encouraged me to just want to do more, which takes up the time that I wish I had for TTRPGs.
Yeah, it do be like that sometimes.
Yeah. Between 9 to 5, and then the family and everything on top of that, already didn't have time for TTRPGs. But now doing my content stuff that I'm doing, it's even less time for it.
Well, what you do is you get Mrs. Comics Dad to also start playing it, and then when the kids are either at grandparents or sleeping or something like that, that gives you time to, because then you can call it a date night.
Oh no, we were doing that. When we first met, we've been together. We just celebrated our 6-year anniversary recently. When we first met, on our initial date, I would talk to her about my interest in tabletops and Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, and she didn't really get it at first. And then I took her to an actual session that I was in when we were still living where we previously lived, and I was still had a group to go and play in person with, and she immediately fell in love with it. So yeah, for the first like 3 years or so, 3-4 years, we were playing, whether it was online or in person or something, and it was great. It just, unfortunately, between moving and life, and we fell out of touch with people. And now where we live, unfortunately, we don't really have family around to take the kids off our hands or anything. So like we've tried a couple of times to get a group going after the kids go to bed, but it turns into a hassle. So maybe one day we'll be able to get another group going. But in the meantime, we have Unmatched that we can play. So
I mean, board games are also fun.
oh yeah, for sure.
I have a ridiculous number of them, and for like holidays. So we host New Year's Eve every year, and I make an enormous dinner, and we we get all the dog hair off all the couches in the guest room and everything else, so everybody can just spend the night. And we literally just spend all night digging out the board games we rarely get around to playing otherwise, because they take too. We have some that take a ridiculously long time. So.
Oh yeah, and those are some of the best ones, honestly. I still am a big fan of Risk, and I used to have a copy of Halo Risk in the closet for the longest time, and I would pull it out whenever we had company come over, because I was just like, let's play some Risk, let's go. And everybody would look at me, including my wife, saying, what is wrong with you? Because I am the type of person that I will sit there for 7 hours and play this board game.
I had that happen once. It was Lord of the Rings Risk. I and my roommates at the time were house sitting for someone, and we basically agreed to come and like keep their pets fed and whatnot for like the day, as long as we could use their machines to do our laundry. And we were there for like a good 8 hours just trying to figure out who was going to win this thing, to the point where I was like, we're both just kind of like weaving back and forth at the other end of the table. We're both exhausted. One of us is going to give up. And then the other shall claim victory.
And that's the perfect setting for it. And also, it actually reminds me of one time back when I used to play Magic the Gathering. A friend of mine and we got together and we played a game of Commander once that lasted about 3.5 hours. And it was ridiculous. It was kind of the same thing. I was like, dude, why are we not just playing Risk? This is taking so long.
Yeah.
What's really fun is trying to play cooperative games with a group that's getting, really intoxicated really quickly.
I have witnessed that. I have never been a part of it, but I have been to enough conventions where I'm wandering around at like 11, 12 o'clock after people have been up to the party floors, and they're just like, let's go downstairs to play some games.
Yeah, I was a part of that once. It was part of an Extra Life event at a comic shop we used to, some people and I used to play Dungeons and Dragons out of, and we did a 24-hour gaming day there to support the Extra Life charity and organization. And somebody decided to liven it up a bit once we hit about maybe 11 o'clock at night, and oh boy, not to mention that we had started at about maybe 6 a.m. the day before. So tiredness plus bringing some party favors. That was it was an experience.
Decisions were made.
Decisions were made, and some may have been regretted.
Saving
Not on my end. Not on my end, but.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
But yeah, for anybody though that's out there looking for just a fun little board game to play to kill some time, definitely check out Unmatched. Can't remember the name of the company that actually does it, even though I have the boxes here. They do have, I think it's Restoration is the company.
Yeah, Eraserhead's been putting the link.
Oh, there it is right there. Yeah, Restoration Games. They do a great job with it. The minis are fun. They're pretty detailed considering it's not Warhammer or D&D minis. They are fairly well detailed. And they're just fun to look at, and yeah, I'll use them for a game of Army Men whenever I get around to having a having a tabletop again.
Yeah. And if you put it on stream, now it's tax deductible.
Ah, there you
go. That's where you get it. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
We have the Outcast Creatives joining us in the last few minutes.
Huzzah! They made it under the wire.
Yes, Lance, hello, welcome.
And then only $25 to break the 900 mark for Jacob. Keep it going, people.
Yeah, $25 will break the mark.
You can do it.
That was my hope by the end of the stream. Was that
I will get off your screen if that means that you will break that mark.
We believe in you.
I don't think that you're being on the on the screen was the issue. Yeah.
I'm one of those people where I'm very down on myself personally, so I wouldn't be surprised.
You were a joy and a delight.
Thank you.
In case anyone missed it, I did in fact put my money where my mouth was, and I have donated $50 to Jacob's thing. Once again, it is getting matched by the very fabulous Dave here. Right up until we have 12 minutes to go on the stream. So anything that goes in the next 12 minutes gets matched.
And Goat, if you could actually send me the link for that. I mean, as of right now on stream, unfortunately, I can't do anything. But once a couple of weeks comes around, I get paid every few weeks. So once I pay bills and everything, I definitely want to help contribute to that as well. So if you can send me the link, and then in a few weeks, so long as that's still up and running, I'll definitely do my part.
Yeah,
I'm doing my part.
Yeah, I don't think that Lance, we are happy to have you even for a few minutes. I don't think there is a time limit on GoFundMe, so okay. I assume it's going to go until either they get kicked out of their apartment or they get the money they need to move out of their apartment.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, so Jacob, and again, this is in the GoFundMe, so I don't feel like I'm breaking any confidences here. Jacob is actually he's a wonderful guy, and he is in a wheelchair, so his mobility is limited, obviously. His parents are both in their 70s. His dad is a paraplegic, and because they're being told that they have to move out of the apartment by the end of May, his mom, who is in her 70s, is having to look for a job
Oh,
to
jeez.
try and make the money
Yikes.
to get them another apartment, because you have to have first month's rent and last month's rent, and because 2 out of 3 of them have limited mobility, they have to hire movers and packers and trucks and drivers and all
Yeah,
that sort
it
of
probably
stuff.
limits where they're going to be looking as well.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
First floor.
And of course, it's going to be all the expensive places.
Yeah,
As
obviously.
your GM, I don't know if that's in the. I know the answer to this, but I don't want to give away anything that's not in the public domain as to where he's located. Oh, it is. He is in Texas. That is part of the fundraiser. So I'm not telling tales out of school here. So, but yeah. So even if it's a couple of dollars, I'm sure they would find it a huge help. They are up to, actually, I haven't refreshed the page, but they were up to $875 last time I looked. So, yep, still $875. So $25 will break the 900 mark. So that's the goal for tonight. In the meantime, we have 9 minutes left for everybody to get their donations in. And in the meantime, let's go around the horn. If anyone has anything they'd like to, I mean, obviously you plug your games, but if you have events, Eraserhead will throw your links back up again. Anything that kind of was not directly game related, if you're going to be at a convention, anything like that, let us know about it. Dave?
Yeah. First of all, Neil, if that's the end of the world that's happening at your place, can you let me know where you are so I can time how long it will take to get here? We will be. Yeah, we have RavenCon coming up on April 25th, and then we're going to be at Atomicon on May 3rd. It's all on our website.
Hang on a second. I'm gonna pause you for a second. A lot of my chat is actually not in the U.S., so can you include the state when you're talking about conventions?
Yes, RavenCon, Richmond, Virginia, on the 25th, and then it's Atomicon on May 3rd in Charleston, South Carolina, and then MomoCon on May 22nd in Atlanta, and on June 18th we'll be at Origins in Columbus, which is I love that one, in Ohio. And I know that these aren't on a list yet, but we're doing GameholeCon and Gen Con too. And our Kickstarter starts on Tuesday. And if you get in there in the first 48 hours, it's nice discounts.
Sweet.
Oh, and also,
I don't think I knew that part.
One of the things, we've given away these hand-cast sterling silver pieces that we kind of machined in, we machined them in brass, and then we did wax castings of them. So like a 10-step process. We're going to make a video about it. And if you sign up on our website, at the bottom of our website in the contest, we're giving one a day away between now and the end of the Kickstarter. So your odds are pretty good of winning one of those. Oh, and the other thing that I wanted to mention, just really cool, and I completely forgot, is one of the things that we're doing is, did you know that the ancient Egyptians invented the D20? And this is a replica of the first one ever found in an Egyptian tomb in 2200 AD. And it was during the Ptolemaic period of Egypt, when the Greeks thought they were capturing Egypt, but Egypt was really making them Egyptian. And so it's got Coptic Egyptian letters on it. I actually had a guy come up to my gaming table once who was a Coptic priest who spoke fluent, like academic level Coptic. It was like, oh, you messed this one up. So next time we're gonna have to fix it. But yeah, that's the very first D20 ever found. It's in a museum right now. We did a replica and hand painted it.
That is awesome.
The Die of Destiny.
So Roman of the Empire has just announced that he's doing a $300 donation as we speak.
Oh my! All right.
Jacob is Roman's. His whole thing is making fun of Roman on stream.
With friends like these, you need more enemies.
Oh, it's hysterical. It's on Thursdays at 8:00. You should take a look. It's great.
Dear.
It's great fun.
Yes, yeah. For those who are wondering, the world has not ended, but I think a Mad Max dump truck chose to drive right past my window in the bank parking lot that I abut to, because I wasn't sure if it was that or if it was thunder, but it was far too mechanical after I got a closer listen to it.
Well, I'm deaf as I don't know, a stone, I guess. So I didn't hear
That's
anything.
fair.
I'm deaf as a mummy.
I hope they're deaf.
Nice.
Oof.
Okay. So Neil, while I'm refreshing again
Yes.
so that we get the official count on get an official count here. Any place you're going to be? Anything you're going to do? You said somebody was doing conventions.
A little bit of everything. I do not have my convention list on me at the time, and not all of them have been confirmed. But I will say, anyone who wants to check out more of my gaming stuff, you can find me on DriveThruRPG. I am currently coasting towards 200 titles that have my name in them, so I'm hoping to break that by the end of the year. You can find my blog, Improved Initiative, taking10.blogspot.com. That's been running for about a decade or so. I'm on the Azakale Games YouTube channel if you just want to see more of my face and hear me talk about my fantasy setting Sundara, World and Chronicles of Darkness. If you are a fan of audio dramas, or if you just want to see a bunch of other weird and wild nonsense, including some fun updates on Army Men. It has its own series on the channel, Tactical Plastic Report, where I'm just trying to take folks through the setting and lay out some of the very silly ideas that I've put out so far.
All right. I'm trying to get screenshots of the thing, but it's updating faster than I can take screenshots.
No.
Well, I suspect it's just because I have a lot running on my computer right now and it gets real cranky.
That's fair.
Comics Dad, where are you going to be?
So I'm going to be here in my house because I don't go anywhere except to work. So you can find me on YouTube at Comics Dad. Like I mentioned before, primarily what I do is I do live streams and I do videos where I just read issues of comic books that I enjoy, I think are fun. But I'm always open to suggestions too. So go ahead and check them out. I do fun voices and whatnot too, depending upon the story being told. I also have been doing a soft launch of Comics Dad over on Rumble as well. So this way, if there's an alternative for anybody who's kind of getting sick and tired of YouTube, they can go over to Rumble as well and check it out over there. And then everybody can always get in touch with me on X at Comics Dad. Apparently, the Comics Dad handle is available literally everywhere I go, so it makes it nice and convenient for me to communicate with people and tell them where to find my links and everything. Whoa, look at that!
Victory.
So,
A victory, at least.
This one is me, and this one is Roman. So, woohoo!
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Very nice.
That's very awesome.
Yeah.
Roman, you are very cool.
Roman, you
And-
are very cool. Everyone is very cool, whoever donated to that tonight.
Yes.
We just put our matching through.
Sweet! All right.
Way to go, Dave and crew.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is so awesome. This honestly will be the most satisfying thing all week. Babies
what is
babies
rightfully
being
so.
born. Babies being
Yes.
born is great, but yeah.
I was going to say, the lambs aren't done yet. Hold off on that judgment.
Just to wrap it up on my end real quick, just the last couple of things is I haven't done my reading videos for this week. They're called Comics Read Along, so by the end of the week I'll have 2 more out. Tomorrow you can everybody can catch me over on the Comics Dad channel, either on YouTube or on Rumble, where we are doing Comics Couple Cafe, which is a bi-weekly show where my wife and we sit and talk with our chat about kind of whatever's just going on. We do a good old chinwag. And then another bi-weekly show to kind of offset that is a show called Talk and Shop that I do where I have a guest on. We talk comics, content creation, and again, just kind of whatever's going on in media, entertainment, news, what have you. Our next guest at our next show is going to be April 10th, and a friend of both my channel and Goat's channel, The Real Tomby, is going to be our next guest on Talk and Shop. So that'll be a good one. Everybody hopefully can come and catch that.
Tomby is the man.
Tomby is the man. That's it. I'm going with my plugs.
All right. I want to thank everyone for being here. Everyone who donated to help Jacob. Dave, thank you so much for that matching. That is amazing. That is gonna make a huge difference in his life.
Sure.
So absolutely wonderful. I'm going to tell you, somebody told me this morning, we'll find out whether or not this is really a community or whether or not he just scrapes up a couple $100, and everyone goes, "Oh, poor Jacob." So this is amazing. This shows that we really do pull together, and it really does. It really does.
This
make a
one's for
difference.
you, Jacob.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a little verklempt here. So yes, thank you all so much, chat. I hope you have a wonderful night. And I hope that again, thank you to my panel. Everybody go subscribe, check out their Discords if they have them, check out their backers if they have them, do all the things.
Don't worry about me. Support these guys. Which way? There we go. These guys. Where are you guys? There we go. Support these guys' projects. Dave and Neil, go support their stuff. Don't worry about me. I'm just some hack on YouTube.
Shush, YouTube hacks need support too.
I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So
fair enough. Well, and support her too, obviously.
Yeah, we are at I forgot to do the check. We are at 433 subscribers, I think.
Nice.
And we broke the 1,000. We broke the 1,000 watch hours mark, which means that we are in fact on target to potentially hit monetization before the end of the year. So that would be. Wow. Ooh, I'm at 435 now.
There you go.
So, and on that happy note, everyone have a wonderful night. And we will hopefully see you. I don't think I've got anything going until. Let's see. My indie author interview is next Monday with, as we affectionately know him on the internet, Lord Toxic. So I hope to see you all there. Racer says this ran smoother than Monday. Yeah, Monday was a bit of a dumpster fire. Everyone have a great night, and we will see you around.
Great meeting you all. Thanks,
everybody.
Happy headbutting.
Meet me at the tavern, have a drink or two. I'm the eclectic goat, and I'm here to gab with you. We'll talk about immersion, adventure-heavy lows, characters and story, warlocks and barbarians and bards, comedy or horror. We got inspiration if you're in need of it, or just need to hang out somewhere cozy. We're the guys for you, we've got time for you. Come and join the crew, here's what to do. Meet us at the tavern, have a drink or two. I'm the eclectic goat, and I'm here to play with you. We'll discuss the theory and the mechanics, how we ask for crits, Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards. meet us at the tavern, have a drink or two. I'm the eclectic goat, and I'm here to play with you. We'll discuss the